There was a girl once, Sara. She was not born broken. She was not born angry or lost. No, she started off just like any other child, wide-eyed with wonder, filled with curiosity, always asking why and dreaming in possibilities. But the world did not see her. Not in the way she needed to be seen. Her father was always away, buried in his work, coming home late at night with his face etched in stress, a faint smile rarely crossing his lips. Her mother, though present, was often absent, her mind distant, preoccupied with responsibilities that Sara could never understand. She grew up in a home full of noise, but a noise that lacked warmth, lacking connection, love, and affection. The conversations around the dinner table were never about what mattered to her. Instead, they were always filled with tension, frustration, and unspoken words. No one asked her how she was. No one noticed the growing sadness in her eyes. She learned to shrink herself. Sara knew that if she spoke too loudly, if she needed attention, it would just be another thing for her parents to ignore. She was not the priority. She learned early that she had to make herself small enough to fit into the corners of their lives. She became the child who asked for nothing, who demanded nothing. She became a ghost in her own home, a silent observer of a family that only existed in fragments. She watched her mother's tired eyes, her father's angry silences, and grew accustomed to the subtle abandonment that lay behind their actions. It was the kind of abandonment you did not need to see to feel. It was the kind that stayed with you, even when people were right next to you. The emotional distance. The way Sara was never seen. The world expected nothing more from Sara than what she could give. She learned that it was easier to stay quiet, to be invisible, than to ask for help. It became routine to suppress her needs, to ignore the weight of the sadness that quietly pressed against her chest. She kept the smile, forced though it was. She kept the laughter, even if it did not reach her heart. She kept pretending that everything was fine, because in her world, that was all she could do. Her mask was perfect. It was a mask of kindness, of politeness, of patience. She could be everything everyone needed her to be, calm, quiet, strong, but behind it, Sara was fading. The smile she wore became the only thing that defined her. No one ever looked past it. They never asked her if she was okay, never saw the confusion and the hurt in her eyes. But pretending has its cost. The first signs of her struggle were subtle. It was not sudden, it did not happen all at once. But slowly, the mask she wore started to feel heavy. The pretending started to take its toll. Sara would wake up feeling exhausted, not because she had stayed up too late, but because the act of being someone she was not, of keeping up the charade, had drained her. She started feeling disconnected from herself. The silence in her house mirrored the silence within her. There were nights when she would lie in bed, the darkness surrounding her, wondering who she was becoming, but too afraid to look too closely. She began to feel a strange emptiness, not just physical, but emotional. She realized that even when she was surrounded by people, she felt alone. There were moments in the crowded hallways of her school when she would look around and feel like she was watching everyone from a distance, like she did not belong. She could not find a way to connect to anyone. Her friends laughed, they joked, they had conversations, but she could not join them. She felt like a foreigner in her own life, someone who had forgotten what it felt like to truly feel alive. The silence of her home bled into her soul. Her mother's distance, her father's anger, those things stayed with her long after the lights went out. She began to wonder if she had any right to ask for more. Why was I not enough? She would ask herself in the middle of the night, when the quiet was too much to bear. She did not know how to explain the sadness that weighed her down. She did not know how to explain the loneliness that no one ever seemed to notice. The more she tried to push it away, the more it grew. Her smile, once so genuine, became a mask. A barrier she built, not just for the world, but for herself. It became the only thing people saw when they looked at her. The strong, kind Sara. The one who always had her act together, who never complained, who was there when people needed her. But inside, Sara was falling apart. What happens when you have been pretending for so long that you forget what it feels like to be real? Sara asked herself, in those quiet moments when no one was around to see her. Her emotional exhaustion became evident. She found herself snapping at small things, irritable for no reason at all. She could not understand why it was happening. The frustration that built up in her would erupt unexpectedly. She would retreat back into herself, avoiding her friends, avoiding her family, unsure of how to deal with the storm inside. But no one knew. No one ever asked. It was as if the weight of the world was on her shoulders, yet it was invisible to everyone around her. She was in pain, but she had no idea how to express it. She did not know how to ask for help, because she did not think anyone would understand. The fear of being judged, the fear of being seen as weak, kept her silent. And the longer she stayed silent, the louder the storm became inside her, the more invisible she felt. What happens when the pretending becomes unbearable? Sara had kept the mask on for so long that it had become a part of her, like a second skin. She wore it every day without thinking, letting it define her, letting it be the only thing the world saw. But deep down, the cracks had been forming for months. She had learned to pretend so well that even she started to believe the act. But that day, the day everything came to a head, Sara could not pretend anymore. It started in a quiet moment, one that should have been peaceful, but instead it felt suffocating. She was alone in her room, trying to do her homework, but the words on the page seemed meaningless. Her mind kept wandering to the same thoughts, the same fears. The silence around her was louder than ever, pressing in on her, almost as if the walls were closing in. And then, without warning, the dam broke. Sara had always tried to keep it together. She had convinced herself that if she just kept pushing, kept pretending, everything would eventually fall into place. But as the tears started to fall, one after another, she realized that she could no longer hold it in. For the first time in years, Sara allowed herself to feel, and the feeling was overwhelming, raw, painful, and unrelenting. She cried for the things she had never said, for the pain she had hidden, for the love she never received. She cried for the child who had learned to be invisible, for the person she had become, and for the woman she was slowly losing touch with. The tears were not just from sorrow. They were tears of release, of finally letting go of the mask she had worn for so long. What happens when you stop pretending and finally allow yourself to feel? Sara had never been taught how to cry. She had never been shown how to let go of the hurt she had buried deep inside. But in that moment, she knew that she could not keep running from it anymore. She had been so afraid of the pain, so terrified of confronting it, that she had buried it in the dark corners of her mind. But the pain had a way of sneaking out, of finding its way to the surface when she least expected it. For so long, Sara had believed that showing her pain would make her weak. She thought that if she cried, if she showed the world how much she was hurting, they would see her as fragile. She had always believed that being strong meant hiding her vulnerability, hiding her wound. But now, she realized that true strength was not about hiding from the pain, it was about facing it. It was not easy. Sara had no idea where to begin. She had spent so long keeping it together, keeping the mask firmly in place, that she did not know how to be real with herself. But somehow, she knew that she had to start somewhere. She could not keep pretending that everything was fine. She could not keep running from the truth. So she started small. She allowed herself to cry, to grieve for the years she had spent in silence. She reached out to the few friends she trusted, slowly opening up, slowly allowing them to see the real Sara. It was not easy. She was terrified that they would see her as weak, that they would turn away. But they did not. They listened. They did not judge. And that was the beginning of her healing. But even as she began to open up, Sara knew that healing was not a one-time event. It was a process, a long, painful journey that she had to take one step at a time. She had to confront everything she had been running from, the loneliness, the abandonment, the shame. She had to face the parts of herself that she had been avoiding, the parts that she thought were too broken to heal. But how do you heal when you do not even know where to start? Sara did not have the answers. She did not know what the next step would be. But she knew one thing. She could not keep pretending. She could not keep hiding. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel everything, even the pain. And as she did, she felt something new. A glimmer of hope, a spark of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the darkness. Healing, she realized, was not about erasing the past. It was not about forgetting the hurt, the loneliness, the sadness. It was about learning to live with it. It was about accepting that the pain was a part of who she was, but it did not have to define her. Sara started writing, not for clarity, not for therapy, but because the words had to come out. They were chaotic, disjointed at first, filled with anger and confusion. But slowly, the words became clearer, more purposeful. She wrote about the moments of pain, the moments of silence. She wrote about the girl who had learned to hide, the girl who had learned to suppress her emotions for so long. She wrote about the woman she wanted to become. Healing begins with honesty, with looking at the darkness and saying, I am ready to face it. Sara did not know what the future held, but she knew that she had to keep moving forward. She had to keep confronting the pain, one day at a time. She had to keep being real, even when it was hard, even when it was terrifying. And with each day, each small step, she felt a little lighter. She was not fixed, and she was not cured. But she was no longer hiding. She was no longer pretending. And that, she realized, was the first step toward healing. If this resonated with you, do not forget to subscribe and follow for more.